Hello friends, welcome. Friends, this video that you are going to watch just now, you'll find it very interesting. And I can guarantee you that the content that I'm going to describe or take you through in this video, you will not find anywhere in the internet within India and outside India because it is an untold story. Now friends, what is the purpose of this video and what made me do this video today? One of my viewers requested me that I should do a video on the India's 6G leadership and what kind of contribution that India is going to make in 6G. The reason is that our Honorable Minister during the time of MWC made a very important statement that India eyes global leadership in 6G space, Minister. And he talks about the Indian Bharat Alliance and various tie-up with other countries, right? So maybe there are a lot of efforts which are going wrong and I'm not going to discount these efforts at all. But today I am going to tell a story of past because history cannot be forgotten. History should not be forgotten because anybody who forgets the history will be in the risk of repeating it, right? So let's go and look at what happened during the time when India was pushing 5Gi. Because this story is an untold story. Nobody knows this story in the great kind of depth which I have described in one of my articles which I wrote on 13th March 2000. Even before this article which came out in the Economic Times on December 15, 2021, which said that India's 5Gi to be merged with global standard. Now friends, because this video is going to be very technical, therefore I can't lose any time. Therefore I'll go straight to my presentation because I need to, filter out the simplicity out of this complex thing so that even a novice viewer can understand what went wrong. That's the whole purpose. So be with me and let's go straight to the presentation. So the presentation, the title of the presentation, which I've chosen here is India's 6G ambition, lessons from 5G experience, a case of misplaced optimism or strategic misalignment, right? So let's go straight and understand what went wrong and what we tried to do and what is the lesson that we need to run. We need to, the lesson that we should learn so that we can go ahead with our 6G ambition properly. Now, 6G ambition is in future. A lot of work is going on and I will not going to discount that as I said already. But we should be looking at the 5G ambition. What drove India's 5Gi innovation? What was the ambition? That is important. So India aimed to improve rural 5G coverage by reducing infrastructure costs. That was the foundational motivation of doing the development of so-called 5Gi. Okay. Now, the technology that they proposed was low mobility large cell, LMLC. Now, to a layman, it does not make any sense. It's like Greek and Latin. So, friends, what I'm going to do is, I am going to take you to the slide, which is kind of, ahead in my presentation before I lose audience. So, let's understand what LMLC is all about. Now, friends, if you look at, everybody understand BTS, tower. Conventional BTS will have certain coverage, normal coverage, which is the normal coverage, which is being represented like bold line here, right? Now, what India was trying to do is by proposing certain changes in the specification, India was trying to stretch the coverage to the dotted line so that the overall coverage of the base station can expand like this. So, if you have a higher coverage of normal BTSs, which is transmitting 5G radio signal, then what happens? Then you will be able to optimize on the number of cell sites and especially in a rural setting deployment. That was the whole idea about 5Gi. You got it now? So let's now go straight to that slide, from where I digressed. So what was the technology enabler? The technology enabler was something called pi/2 BPSK. Now again, I'm running a risk of losing audience. So please don't go. You will understand it. Even if you do not understand technology, I'll guarantee you'll understand it, right? So what is this pi/2 BPSK modulation? So let's go straight to that slide again, right? So that I don't lose you. Now typically what happens is that whenever you're trying to radiate from a BTS, and when the signal basically spreads out in all direction, it has to follow a certain modulation technique. What is modulation technique? Modulation technique is packaging the information, right, in the RF signal so that it reliably reaches the handset. Reliably. It should not dissipate, it should not get contaminated, corrupted when it gets transmitted from here till here. So as long as the signal travels, from the base station to the handset is happy because it is now able to grasp what is being said by the caller. So you need to use a modulation technique, and modulation technique can be of different types. That is what this pi by 2 BPSK is all about, and I will go and explain to you, how it is different from other modulation technique. Okay. So the objective was, as I told you, to extend the cell size and reduce BTS density and improve affordability. Okay, so got it? Now let's go to the technical concept which I was talking about. What is pi by 2 BPSK and how it helps to stretch the coverage which I was mentioning from this line, which is the bold line, to the dotted line. That is the question that we are going to answer here, right? So it boosts the coverage. So pi by 2 BPSK is doing what? It is boosting the central frequency. So it is basically doing what? It is boosting the central frequency components of the signal. Now again, I run the risk of losing the audience. Therefore, I go straight to this slide. Let me explain what I basically mean. Normally, if you have a filter or a RF wave running, so the filter is going to be of this kind. So what is filter? Filter is that there is a gate through which an RF signal passes, and anything which falls outside this gate should get attenuated. As simple as that, right? So normally you would like your filter to have a flat characteristics. Why flat characteristics? Because you would like all the frequency components to be amplified uniformly. Because if you amplify uniformly all the frequency components, then the spillover at the edge is going to be as minimal as possible, right? But what pi by 2 BPSK does is it amplifies the central frequencies, right, components within this bandwidth, which is the RF wave, higher than what it does at the edge. This is the technology, as simple as that. And what kind of purpose it solves? It basically can stretch the coverage, right, which I showed you here, from here to here. And the compromise it does is that the data speed at this particular point of place is going to be lower than what you normally would get. So it compromises on data speed, means throughput, and basically trades with coverage. So coverage increases, data speed decreases. Again, let's go straight to that slide to understand how it happens. Why data speeds, coverage increases and data speed decreases. Now what happens is that there is a concept called electromagnetic field. You know that, and there was Juhi Chawla all over the place. People have been jumping all around, cancer and all kind of threat. So handset has to be limited by a certain amount of power level. You can't go beyond that power level called 23 dBm. So if you are going to amplify certain portion of the signal, right, which is beyond what the 23 dBm level is, then you run the risk of breaching the EMF threshold. So what you do is that you boost the central component of the frequencies and attenuate the edge so that the average level remains 23 dBm. In the process, what you do is you are able to expand the coverage of this cell side, but because if you are not uniformly boosted the signal all across the case, your throughput decreases. That is the simple concept, friends. I don't want to get further into this, otherwise everybody will get confused. Okay. Now, as I told you, pi by 2 BPSK is special. There are different types of modulation scheme, right? QPSK, pi by 2 BPSK, and there are, the modulation scheme can vary from lower level modulation and higher level modulation. Now, why do you use higher level modulation and why do you use lower level modulation? That is the concept we need to understand. The reason we do use higher level modulation, because if we are confident that the signal to noise ratio is higher to withstand any kind of corruption which may happen in between. So then we can stretch or we can enhance the modulation scheme to get a better throughput, because as the modulation increases, the bit rate increases, so throughput increases. But at the edges of the signal, what will happen? Edges of the base station, there is a chance of signal to noise ratio decreasing. So if you want to stretch the coverage to a level which goes to the dotted line, then you have to use a different modulation scheme, which I told you. This is called pi by 2 BPSK, to able to compromise the throughput to stretch the coverage. That is as simple as that, and that is why pi by 2 BPSK is special, right? But here is a catch again, friends. Let's understand this so that you understand very clearly where it is used, where pi by 2 BPSK is used, and why it should not be used, and what kind of mistake India committed. Now, friends, the problem is that when you are having a bandwidth which is pretty large and a frequency band which is pretty high, then it makes sense to use pi by 2 BPSK. Why? Because the loss of capacity because of this uneven amplification does not drastically reduces throughput, because you have a very large bandwidth, friends. That is the reason why when you have large quantum of spectrum, pi by 2 BPSK becomes a natural choice. Because another reason, if let's say if you are going to deploy a frequency band, let's say 6 gigahertz or anything, then the coverage is going to be pretty short, and therefore any gain that you are able to stretch right from the base station so that the handset can receive the signal, that is fine, because then what happens is that you can compromise on throughput for coverage, but not in the low frequency band, because in the low frequency band, first, bandwidth is limited, and therefore it doesn't make any sense to use pi by 2 BPSK, especially in 700 megahertz band, or let's say in 3.5 gigahertz band, because first, the quantum of bandwidth is quite limited, and some of the 700 I'm going to talk about, you can't even use pi by 2 BPSK because the bandwidth is so low that this trading is going to make the signal at the edge like throttling. It is going to increase the throughput so low that this stretch that you're going to get out of this pi by 2 BPSK, especially in an FDD setting or a lower frequency band, is going to be of no value, right? Now let's look at, so we have already spoken about this, right? It will lead to very low efficiency and all that we have already spoken. Now there is an important concept called PAPR. I don't want to go through this concept. Let's skip this, because people who are interested can pause the presentation and look at it. So let me just talk about it. So basically what happens is that whenever you are doing an uneven amplification, then the whole system becomes a little bit unstable. So that is what is called, what is this concept called? Let me go again to this concept. This is called peak power of signal to average power signal ratio. So therefore, pi by 2 BPSK, what it does is, it actually does this smoothing better. That is what, right? So let's forget about that, and anybody interested can learn more through, AI and other internet research. You know how modulation is chosen. Somebody may ask a question that, look, we have got different type of modulation mechanism, pi by 2 BPSK, QAM, etc. How do we choose what modulation to use? So it is done in an automatic fashion. It all depends, what kind of signal to noise ratio that the base station sees, right? So it's called adaptive modulation. So, right? So that's all I'm going to talk about it. We don't, otherwise the presentation will become very, very long. Now, what did India do? Now comes the meat of the presentation. India proposed to mandate pi by 2 BPSK first in a low frequency band, which is 700 megahertz band. Because it thought that 700 megahertz band is a virgin spectrum band and where 5G is going to be deployed. So it is better to use 5 by 2 BPSK in 700 to stretch the coverage. It kind of resonated very, very well, right? Now, problem was that 700 megahertz band was not a TDD band, it was an FDD band. That created a huge problem. And the quantum of spectrum is also less, 10 megahertz bandwidth. So it does not give that kind of benefit that pi by 2 PPSK can, and there are other technical issues which I'm not going to talk about. So there was a change in strategy of India to move to 3.5 gigahertz band. Now friends, if you want to go in a rural setting and your strategy and your whole concept is to stretch the coverage of the base station, do you think it makes sense to try a 3.5 gigahertz band rural deployment? Let me ask you, the coverage is going to be so low that any stretch that you will be able to do in the coverage is not going to give you that kind of dividend. So therefore, what people generally do is that they would like to go in the 6 gigahertz band and above, even if they want to deploy pi by 2 BPSK, because the gains are substantial proportion to the normal coverage. So therefore, it did not make any sense for India to go to 3.5 gigahertz band. So if you look at, they realized that 700 megahertz were unfit, and therefore it went to 3.5, but it was a poor propagation characteristics, and it was not an ideal solution. Marginal coverage gain, significant throughput loss, right? And that is what happened. The tussle between ITU and 3GPP. India was able to navigate their way through in ITU. Now, what is ITU and what is 3GPP? ITU is just a visionary organization. All the government participants go there in the meeting, discusses, and comes out with some framework, which is kind of, more strategic in nature, in guidance. They are not a standard development organization, okay? The standard development organization is 3GPP. Okay, now which basically creates technology. It lays out technology, practically how it can be deployed. The 3GPP is the organization. Now, India's RIT, the radio interface, a technology so called, passed through ITU, but it could not get adopted in 3GPP because there was no special benefit of deploying pi by 2 BPSK in a lower frequency setting, because 3GPP already had an optional kind of, for all the handset vendors to use pi by 2 BPSK for bands which are 6 gigahertz and above. So there was no need for this to be brought in the lower frequency band for reason which I have already explained. And because of that, because there was no demand worldwide, there was no ecosystem. It was mainly led by IITs. There was no commercial manufacturing's backing. Global handset vendors found no value, no productization, no real, world adoption. So that's what the lesson that we should be learning from 6G. We need to propose something which is meaningful, which is useful. It scales globally. You can't be looking for solutions which are just for narrative purpose, make sense, and real benefit does not get derived, because the scales that we have in the rural setting as per devices are concerned will not motivate anybody in the world manufacturers, so-called the big manufacturers, to produce handsets for India-specific requirement. You need to have solutions which scales globally. That's where the handset prices can go down. Otherwise, it is going to remain pretty high. That is what I basically want to say here in this presentation, that if India really wants to basically go and become a player in 6G, we cannot forget what we did in past. The past is very important, and that is the reason, friends, I am doing this presentation. Some people may not like it, but for me, the truth matters as long as it is supported by data, and people cannot refute what I am saying, because when I was working in a commercial organization, then itself I wrote this article. If you go to my website, and you will understand that this article is so technically, complete with all kind of data. It is very difficult to refute what I am saying, friends, right? There could be some nuances here and there which I can't help, because it is not possible for me to tell the full story in such a short window period of time. And I will run the risk of losing audience, because the whole purpose is to let everybody know who is not an engineer. So, final thoughts. India's RIT effort for 5G was technically creative, no doubt about it. But it was strategically misaligned with global adoption realities. For 6G, there is a course correction which is needed. Else, innovation may remain confined in paper, and we will not have any products, friends. So 19 minutes have passed, friends. I've tried my level best to kind of tell the story within 20 minutes, because that is the attention period which I think the viewers may have. Anything beyond that, I'm going to lose viewers. My purpose is that people should know, and that's what I'm wanting to do in this effort on the initiative. And friends, thanks for listening till the end, and I'm really grateful that you are showing interest in my channel, and I will continue to keep up with this effort to bring you content which you will not find anywhere else in the world. Thank you very much, and for listening till the end, watching till the end. I'll come back with a new video on a new topic next time. Thank you.